All right, question.
Answer.
What are y'all personal not safe for work topics?
I feel like we shouldn't talk politics.
Oh yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
I feel like people are like, no, that's definitely not a work topic. Because people they get real angry.
Mm-hmm. Another one could be like, for some people, like religion. Like, I'm not scared to talk about it, but not get into too much depth depending the person.
Yeah, I feel like that's touchy as well.
Yeah.
Do you guys always respect that, like, unsaid rule?
No.
No? So you've talked politics and religion at work?
Depends on the person I'm talking to. Because it's not... Depends, because there are topics that even beyond politics and religion that you can talk about, but it all depends on the person you're talking to. That's where everything tends to flip-flop, because one person, you can talk about politics all the live long day, but let's say I'm a Republican and you're a Democrat, but you hate talking about politics, then I can't talk politics with you.
So I guess with some people, we've got to set that boundary.
Yeah.
And both sides must respect it.
Yeah.
For it to work. For it to be a good working environment. If not, it's going to be very... Yeah, I agree. Huh. Okay. So I think then that we agree that boundaries are good. Boundaries are important.
They're necessary.
Right? If we define boundaries, it's really just like those limits and those rules that people set for themselves in order to protect themselves, right? At work, we kind of have that boundary to not talk about religion or politics because we're trying to protect ourselves from a, I don't want to call it like an unsafe working environment, more like, I don't know.
Like tense.
Tense. That's a good word. Like a tense working environment. Because imagine having to be stuck there for like an 8-hour shift in that tense environment. I think it's much better if you just set like that rule where you're just like, okay, we're not going to talk about this. We're not going to provoke a tense situation here. That's interesting.
I mean, I think boundaries can even extend kind of outside of work because I'm pretty sure, like, contrary to popular belief, like there's a lot of kids that say, oh, I tell my parents everything. You don't tell your parents everything. There are some things that even you keep to yourself. Like, there's people that say, I tell my wife or my husband everything. You don't even tell them everything. There's some things that even we as humans keep to ourselves, and there's only one person that knows. But boundaries work outside of work. They're extremely necessary for any moment, any time, any place.
You know, but I was thinking about this. Like, I was thinking about why, like, I feel like, yes, we agree, boundaries are important. But then sometimes we don't establish them, we don't set them, we don't communicate them. And I was thinking about why. Like, why do we as humans find it so hard to, like, set boundaries when we know it's important? Do you have an answer?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So I think, like, it's really hard to set boundaries first because you don't know how the other person's going to take them. Like, sometimes you think, like, more how the other person might take them than, like, I need to set this boundary for, like, my own sanity. You know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's because we fear that they're going to see us as weak or that they're going to reject us. Because sometimes, like, I feel like we have this, like, wrong idea sometimes about boundaries where we set them because we're just not capable of dealing with the situation, or we're not strong enough. We're not strong enough to talk about that topic or be around I don't know, something like whatever rule it is, whatever limit it is. We see boundaries as like, no, that's a sign of weakness. So I can't express my rule, I can't express that limit because then they're gonna see me as weak.
I think that also comes with, like, again, how I said in the beginning, kind of like knowing your people. Because the correct way to set boundaries, if we're talking like boundaries with people, because boundaries can be set on anything. Could it be people, could it be an object, could it be a substance. But when it comes to people, you have to know the people you're talking to. So if you're not communicating properly at all times, that's when kind of the boundaries, that's when kind of like those things type of happen. Because if you know you have a person that, for example, if you know you're talking to a person that has a fear of rejection, but you need to set a boundary with them because things have been tough regardless of the situation, then you knowing the person should help you kind of like ease it or know how to bring it up in communication. Because there's one way to say like, hey, we need to stop hanging out every day versus, hey, I think we should stop hanging out every day. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference. There's a way to go about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like it's especially hard for people to set boundaries if they have these people pleasing tendencies. Like they just need everyone else to be happy.
Yeah.
And they don't prioritize like their needs. And I think that's something that we've talked about before, but it comes up again. Like it's so important to like make sure that you're safe. Like make sure like you're happy, make sure your needs are being met, and that like around you like you can have like that safe environment whenever you do set those boundaries.
And I think that like when how you were saying like we set boundaries to protect ourselves, like I think it's also important like that boundaries also protect other people. Like and adding to the word protect, it's also a form of respect. Like it's respecting myself, but it's also respecting you.
You know, I like that you brought that up because I was thinking about this and I was like, do I always respect people's boundaries? When do I not? And I think it's like the worst whenever we're mad or when we're hurt. That's when we're like, I'm gonna push this line a little bit more, see what happens, because I'm a little touched right now by what they just said. So I'm gonna like, they told me they don't like talking about, I don't know. They told me not to mention like this one thing that happened in the past. And I'm gonna mention it right here to see like how they react. Like that's, I feel like we're all like, like that's a picture of all of us right there. And like I'm like, man, what can I do to make sure like I'm not that person, that I'm not the one that, because sometimes we're talking about topics like this and we're like, yeah, other people like, yeah, they should treat me better. And like, sure, they should, but how are you treating others? Are you respecting other people's boundaries when you're mad or when you're hurt?
Yeah, no, that definitely. I'm not a person that I don't really break boundaries when I'm mad. When I'm hurt, then yeah, I'm going out. When I'm hurt, then I'm going out of my way.
That's why I said both.
If I feel like you hurt me, then I'm going out of my way to make sure you know
that you hurt me.
Like, and it could be every which way. It could either be by overstepping a boundary or by putting a bunch of unnecessary boundaries.
That's something else too.
Because there are such things as called unnecessary boundaries. I'm a person, and I do this a lot. I like to keep people at an arm's length or even further. Okay. So I like to put up a bunch of boundaries that people can't cross or keep things to myself. So, and I do a lot when I get hurt, but even that can be misconstrued as unhealthy because boundaries are necessary, but if you have too much, then at that point you're just isolated from the world, and that's no bueno either.
No, because it's not how we were designed. We were designed to be in community with each other, which is why it's so important that we talk about things like this, because we were designed to have healthy relationships with each other. So this is a way, establishing boundaries and respecting other people's. So I feel like, what can we do then? If we're mad, if we're hurt, what can we do then to respect that boundary and not want to, overstep it or do what you sometimes do? Maybe you can speak from experience if you want to be vulnerable, and put up all those boundaries.
I mean, I think it just comes from discipline. I think anything that has to do with boundaries is you creating that kind of form of like your own discipline not to do it, and thinking about being in the other person's shoes.
Empathy.
That's in my opinion, that's the best way to go about it. Because like I said, whereas a person that when I get hurt, I tend to put up boundaries and I tend to walk away from people. Sometimes I tend to realize how much a lot of people kind of get a little annoyed when I stop kind of like communicating or talking or even showing face. So, and I would think like, what if that was me in reverse? Like, what if that was one of my friends just disappeared off the face of the earth? I'd be pretty pissed. So I think creating that discipline, and on top of that, just creating discipline in general when it comes to boundaries helps, because like I said, boundaries they work with people, but they also, for our personal selves, we have to set boundaries with things like addiction and
Yeah.
things like routines, like stuff like that, because those are extremely necessary.
I agree. And so I like that you mentioned that about like setting those boundaries with ourselves too, because sometimes like we think of boundaries and we just think of like our relationships with others, but it can also be like our relationship with things or with sin itself. Like I was saying earlier, sometimes we think that no, I have to set these boundaries because I'm just well, we don't want to, because we might think that it's a sign of weakness. But I was thinking, and I honestly feel like whenever we set a boundary when it comes to like sin, it shows maturity, because it shows that self-awareness. You know your limits, you know your strengths, and you know your weaknesses, and you know that truth where you're just like, okay, I do have my weaknesses, and that is okay, because we all have our weaknesses, and knowing that is like a great level of maturity. And we kind of just have to accept this. And it can be hard because sometimes we want to play tough. And I think we talked about this when we were preparing for this, where we want to like flirt with that temptation, or at least that's the saying in Spanish. Coquetear con la tentación. And we kind of like really want to push the line. We're like, oh, yeah, I guess like I shouldn't be around like so much like alcohol, because I might be tempted to like drink a little too much, but I think it's okay. I can do it. I can do it. And then you get drunk. So it's just we need that level of self-awareness to know you could possibly, but you have a weakness, and to protect yourself and to make sure that you don't fall into that temptation. It's much more mature if you just set that boundary for yourself. I don't know if that's happened to you guys. It's definitely hard to do it, because I feel like I tend to, like, I'm like, I can probably be okay if I don't set the boundary.
Yeah, everybody has something that everybody has a boundary that they flirt with, no matter what. Like everybody has has an addiction to something. It doesn't necessarily mean something bad, but that's a whole another episode for another day.
Mm-hmm.
But setting a boundary with any addiction, and also setting a boundary with even something simple as like time management.
Yeah.
That is what it comes down to. Like, I'm a person, my sleep schedule is poor. I don't sleep. Contrary to pop, I don't sleep. I'll go to work, get off of work, go to the gym, do something in the middle of the night, whether it be, I don't know. I can do anything. And then go to sleep at like 5 a.m, then wake up at 9 and do it all over again. So,
Oh my.
and I have a habit of thinking that I can keep doing that, and doing. If I don't, there's times where I have to put a limit to myself, because I'll come, for example, on a Sunday morning after being awake for like the last 3 days, playing the piano on the altar like this, and won't survive. And sometimes I need to put that boundary, like, you need to stop running around and trying to find things to do and just stay at home and sleep.
Yeah, and then like it's not a weakness that you need sleep.
Mm-hmm.
You're just human. And humans need sleep. They need to rest. And I feel like I struggle with this a lot because I have these perfectionist tendencies. I'm not a people pleaser, but I'm very perfectionist. And so that results in me being like, I can do all things. Instead of being in Christ, I can do all things in me, myself, and I can do it. I can do it. And so because I can do it, and I have that wrong concept in my head sometimes, I'm like blinded by that, I'll be like, I can do all things. I don't need to put a boundary there. Mm-hmm. Like if I want to do like 100 things in a day, I can do it. And so like I'll put that in myself, and sometimes like I'll lose a little bit of sleep or not get as much sleep as I want. I will neglect important relationships because I have to focus on what I'm doing. And in my head, I'm doing it right because that way, like, you know, I get to do everything. And I don't set that boundary as like, no, you need to rest. Not because you're weak, but because you're human, and rest is necessary.
Yeah, and I think that's something like really interesting is like, for example, in the 2 examples that you guys gave with like where you've had to set boundaries, it shows like if you don't set boundaries, there are consequences. Like there are things that suffer because we don't set those boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's really important to set boundaries.
Yeah. So I feel like we should definitely think about prioritizing boundaries when it comes to our relationships, when it comes to ourselves, and also make sure that we are respecting those boundaries with other people.
Yeah, I think in the end of the day, boundaries can only be set truly based on the relationship you have with God. Because he's the one who's going to let you know where those boundaries truly need to lie, because he knows all things.
Yeah.
And you also got to make sure you're not setting the wrong boundaries with your relationship with him too. Because some people tend to do that. Some people tend to give more of themselves to one thing than they do to God, and that is, in a sense, setting a boundary to him.
Right,
and his boundaries, the boundaries to him should be none. There should be no boundaries.
He wants us close.
That's the one remember earlier when I said you don't tell everybody everything. Not your parents or your wife, you tell him everything, because there's some things that even that live in your heart that only he knows.
And there's times where like God wants to work certain areas in your life, and we're like, you can work on this area, but not this one. Like this one, don't touch it. Like
yeah.
So
we definitely do that sometimes.
It's like when he tells you, "Hey, I want you to do this, but I want you to." It's like if he tells you walk 1 mile. How many miles are you gonna walk? Let's be real. Some people will be like, I want to walk 2 to please God. He didn't tell you to walk 2. He told you to walk 1. That's the boundary. You just broke it. Just disobeyed.
That's true. Well, guys, we got work to do on our heart.